I am a pre-K teacher. I teach for the joy of the kids, of learning, and I just have fun with them, just to watch them grow. My name is Angela. I am 60 years old, and this is my story. I grew up in the Sutton homes, and I come from a family of 7, single household. Looking back, I know that was a big responsibility for her to care for all of us the way that she did, just to make sure that we had a roof over our head and food to eat. And I could see that it may have been a struggle, for her. I have 2 kids. My oldest, her name is Anissa. My youngest, his name is Joshua. Having a son has been all of my gray hairs. In middle school, it became a big job. When he joined a gang with other kids, I knew then that it was more than what I anticipated for his life to be. Once I got a divorce, then I saw my kids changing because it affected them. Where Joshua, he got to high school and he found out that his dad was in jail. And I guess it affected him in a way, and he just burned out. The first time I had to deal with this, I get a call at 12 o'clock at night, and they let me know that he's in juvenile. He was 15. I know that I had to go to court, and I'm standing there in disbelief that I'm in court with my son, and I really don't understand why. Officer, he said, I know he comes from a good place, but just let him go. Well, for me as a parent, that's kind of hard, but he didn't change. And we went through everything that we went through, and he ended up in prison. For me, raising a Black young man, it was hard because I always felt guilty. Was it something I did? Was it something I missed on my behalf as his mom? I felt guilty because I had to work to get off of welfare. That was not an option for me, but I knew I had to have something to take care of them. And so with me going to school and me working 12 hours as a CNA, and I did that over 20 years, and then I just felt, how do a woman raise a boy to be a man? I remember I get a phone call from a friend of his, and he says, Miss Wilson, Josh has been shot. And I just sit there, and I don't look back to blame anyone, because he's my responsibility. You get on housing, and housing is really, I would think it was there to help you to feel better about where you stay, but you're only limited to where you can live. And yet that's where the system fails, where people discriminate against you when you try to get a better apartment. That's the downfall there. And then you have to stay in this little bitty block, which is not good company for your kids. When you're in the school system, it's not the best, because you have to be here. If you're on Section 8, you have to. And if you can't afford to pay the rent, then you can't afford to break off of it. But I did, but it was too late. No, it's not going to be easy for him. I know this. I'm just hopeful that he will find the right support to support him on his journey for, job placement, place to stay. Don't judge single moms. Those are the women the single parents who work the hardest to make things better in the world, or make a difference because you're so hard on them that they're going to do everything in their power to prove you wrong.
La manera de cómo pude monitorear mi embarazo fue buscando atención médica en Nuevo Laredo porque no calificaba para un plan de salud en Estados Unidos. Mi nombre es Liliana y esa es mi historia. Bueno, la razón obviamente por la que llego a Laredo, Texas es porque tengo familia ahí, la familia por parte de mi mamá son de Nuevo Laredo, entonces para nosotros es como que una manera pues fácil de llegar ahí y pues buscar otras oportunidades en Estados Unidos. Llego yo con una visa de turista, eso me permite pues entrar a Estados Unidos de una manera legal y bueno, pues a lo que llegamos es prácticamente a tratar de buscar una manera de cómo producir y soportarnos financieramente. Tengo la oportunidad de encontrar algo muy pronto. En ese lugar es donde yo conozco, bueno, pues al que después me caso con él, el papá de mis hijos. Pues nos enamoramos y decidimos formar una familia. Cuando yo quedo embarazada, empieza a dar ansiedad y un seguro privado en ese momento para nosotros no estaba a nuestro alcance. Afortunadamente uno tiene como que acceso a los dos mundos, ¿verdad? Y si tienes la visa de turista o eres residente, ciudadano, pues es muy fácil y bastante económico acceder a seguros de salud o dentales, hospitales, farmacias en Nuevo Laredo. Entonces, eso es muy accesible. En mi caso, pues me ayudó bastante. Obviamente, eso me hizo sentir mucho más tranquila, saber que de alguna manera, mientras pasaba lo de mi situación legal, pues yo iba a poder ser atendida en México. No fue planeado, me embarazo muy pronto de mi segundo hijo. Tuve que volver a hacer lo mismo, ir a Nuevo Laredo, atenderme ya con la doctora que me había visto de mi hija. Todo aparentemente estaba bien y desafortunadamente hubo una complicación como por el sexto o séptimo mes de embarazo y por falta de atención médica no fue detectado a tiempo. Me dice el doctor, bueno, no está bien, esto no se ve nada bien. Aquí en Laredo no hay cirujanos para bebés, probablemente el bebé vaya a necesitar una operación de emergencia, vete para San Antonio inmediatamente. Mi bebé nace con problemas en el cerebro, su cerebro no se alcanza a desarrollar por todo el fluido que se le va a su cabecita. El bebé lo mantenemos, los doctores lo mantienen con vida artificial solamente 10 días. Mi bebé muere en mis brazos. La situación de mi hijo sí pudo haberse evitado si se hubiera detectado a tiempo. Afortunadamente, mi situación legal finalmente ya se había arreglado unos meses antes de que pasara todo lo de mi hijo. Una de mis primas que vivía en Nuevo Laredo, ella fallece. Ahora sí que nada más alcanza a tener a su último hijo y fallece 9 meses después. Ella me pide que me quede con Andrés. Dios me lo manda, no porque me fuera a reemplazar a mi hijo, para nada, nunca lo vi de esa manera, pero pasa esa situación de que yo pierdo uno y por alguna o por otra situación las cosas se acomodan y de repente yo me veo con otro bebé en mis brazos. O sea, fue así como que un milagro para mí. Yo dije, no, Dios me quiere mucho. Mi situación definitivamente hubiera sido diferente si yo hubiera tenido un seguro de salud. Mi vida hubiera sido otra cosa. Mi hijo a lo mejor estuviera aquí, no lo sé, pero siempre pensar en esa posibilidad es lindo. Yo vendo seguros ahora después de que cambié de carreras. Yo sé la importancia que es de verdad tener un seguro de salud ahora. Por eso yo hablo con mis clientes y les digo, ¿sabe que califica para esto? Como yo ya pasé por esa situación de lo que es no tener un seguro, empujo mucho eso ahora con mis clientes. Pues yo como madre me siento súper orgullosa de que al final de toda esta jornada tan difícil y tan linda al mismo tiempo, mis hijos se unen a las Fuerzas Armadas a servir a su país, a nuestro país que tanto nos ha dado, y eso la verdad me tiene a mí súper contenta. Mi corazón está agradecido y bendecido por todo lo que ahora tengo.
I always had that in my mind where I told myself, I want a good life. I want to better myself, but I think my passion was more of I want to help others. Hi, my name's Iris. I'm 44 years old, and this is my story. I'm a single mom. I do have a son. He's 6 years old, and he's been my everything. Never thought to be a single mom. It just kind of happened that way. His father's not involved at all whatsoever, so I get no help. He never sees his dad. He knows who his dad is, just never sees him. His name is Jared. He is a very happy boy. We're basically together 24/7. There's no day we're apart. I did graduate with a psychology degree. I got a minor in Spanish education. I became the Spanish teacher in our school. My strength, I think, comes basically just for my son, just seeing his face. He's my motivation. He's everything. You think that you're gonna, you graduate from school and you're gonna get paid all this money, you're gonna be able to pay your student loans and everything. Well, no, it doesn't work that way. And it just seemed like I never had the opportunity to actually save. It was just paying bills after bills after bills. I feel like, oh my goodness, I've worked so hard, but I feel like every day I live pay to paycheck. It's never given me the opportunity to actually save for a home, which I want a home because that's what my son tells me all the time. He's like, Mom, why can't we have a house? I wish we had a backyard so I could play, or we could get a dog. People think like, well, you must get paid pretty good money, or you did a career. How come you're not where you're supposed to be at? For any single parent, you work so hard just to get to where you're at. And I think sometimes people don't understand that. They think that, oh, it's easy, you could go ask. No, I've gone to ask for help. And that's another thing. I have friends that tell me, no, pues ve y pide estampillas o pide ayuda médica. I've gone to ask for help. There's been situations where I feel like, can I get help, for him, like insurance-wise? No, because you're just right at that line. This is what I've done personally. I take my bills, I take everything, and I tell them, you tell me I have to pay all this, and you tell me I need to pay for insurance. I don't have enough money, or I don't have enough money for food. But you tell me I'm right there, so you can't help me. I think when I left that day, knowing, that I was just getting $50, I told myself, I have to do something. I've seen other single moms that have been able to raise their children. And then you see them later on in the future once they're older, and they're good, and they have a family, and they don't have the issues that you went through. I think that's, for me, just seeing my son maybe in the future and knowing that he's gonna be good and he's gonna have a good future and he's gonna have a family and he might not go through everything I had to go through. That's where my strength comes in. In the future, I would like for my son to say my mom was bien luchona, trabajadora. She never gave up, no matter what.
Oh, I love my son. He's like a big eye-opening for me because I think if I didn't have him, I would be in the streets. My name is Brittany. I'm 22 years old, and this is my story. Four of my uncles raised me. They did everything for me. My mom was in my life, but wasn't in my life as a mother should be. She was addicted to a drug that made me lose her, and then she got with someone that made me lose her even more. When I became like 12, 13 years old, that's when I finally got my mom. She went on a retreat and she decided to actually be part of my life. I lived with one of my uncles for like my whole life. He's the one that passed away. It was a very hard thing for me because he's one that actually raised me, like took care of me, and losing him was a big thing for me. I lost myself for a while. My 12th grade year is when I lost my niece. My mom took the custody, but my mom has a full-time job as well, so she couldn't really take care of them because it was three of them and they were still little. I took the responsibility of taking them, getting them ready for doctor's appointments, for everything, which made me miss so much school. They called me down to the office. I sat there and they said, like, hey, like, this is the end of the year. You're not passing at all. You're not going to graduate. That broke me. I cried in front of my counselor. After a while, I met this person that I thought was Prince Charming. As I was in this relationship, a month came and I was pregnant. I lost it. I didn't know what to do. I cried to my uncle, the one that really raised me. He's one that I hurt a lot. Like he was like, "You're still young. Like you didn't graduate." I was like, I know I was still young. And I didn't know what to do. I could say I gave up on my life. I was like, I'm never gonna get nowhere with being pregnant now. Finally, I went back to school and I walked the stage being pregnant. Still, I was about probably like 14 weeks pregnant by that time. After that, I felt like, okay, well, now I'm gonna get myself a job. So I moved out of my mom's house and I lived with the father of my child. I got abused by him being pregnant. I got told ugly stuff. You're never gonna make it in life. You're pregnant now. Like, who's gonna want you now? I didn't tell anyone. I couldn't tell anyone because I was scared. I had my child and it just got worse. One day he busted my cheek and I came to work like that. I almost lost my job because of him. To me, I need more money. I think that's why I want to go to college to do my dream because I need the money. You know, 7.25, $12 don't cut a lot anymore. I have bills. I'm 22 years old. I have more responsibilities. Not only that, now I have a child to take care of. It sucks because in my, like the food stamp part, I only get $19 of food stamps from me and my child. They say I make too much. I think that's wrong because I don't make barely anything, like anything. Finally, one of the ladies here said like, hey, you're young. Like, do you want to go back to college? And I was like, no, I don't have the money. And then she was like, no, like, come talk to me. Like, I could help you. So I said, okay. And I doubted myself. I really did. I was like, I'll try it, but I won't do it. Like, I won't make it.
And no, like, I did make it. I got accepted to Our Lady of the Lake University for criminal justice. And that's my dream since high school, was criminal justice. And I will finish it.
Yo tengo una tiendita chiquitita en un shop de antigüedades. Y vendo ropa, de repente diseños míos. Otro también estoy en banquetería, ese es un part-time. A ver qué tal. Este es un evento de una boda. Yo siempre estoy trabajando. Hola, ¿qué tal? Mi nombre es Bianca y esta es mi historia. Soy de Torreón, Coahuila, México. Me vine desde muy niña con mi mamá a buscar el sueño americano, como muchos, cuando tenía 7 años. Mi mamá llegó con visa. Cuando mi mamá se separa de mi padrastro llegó a un punto de hacernos maltrato familiar. De hecho, mi padrastro una vez más dijo, es que regrésense a México, como vinieron, regrésense, yo no los quiero aquí. Y mi mamá se agarró de valor. Entonces dice, mamá, no, es que ya nos queremos ir porque pues este señor sí nos maltrata mucho en la casa, que sufres ver el racismo en tu propia casa. Yo lo viví con mi padrastro y mi mamá, que le decía cosas muy feas por una discusión fuerte, que creo que fue lo que, boom, hizo una bomba. Dijo, mamá, ¿sabes que ya nos vamos? Porque, o sea, no, estás afectando a mis hijos. Dijo, mamá, no. Dijo, la dignidad mía y de mis hijos vale más que una casa. De hecho, mi mamá ya hasta se quería ir de aquí de Estados Unidos. Nosotros somos residentes. Nos ayudó una organización. Para nosotros, América, Estados Unidos, nos ha dado mucho. Yo siempre he dicho algo, que México es mi madre y Estados Unidos es mi padre. Mi mamá no habla nada de inglés, habla cero, no habla nada. Agarraba clases en las tardes en nuestra escuela para poder aprender, pero si iba a las clases, pues se perdía su trabajo, y si no iba a su trabajo, pues no pagaba la renta. Entonces, o comíamos o aprendía. Entonces ella decidió mejor pues trabajar, dedicarse a nosotros. A mí me impacta mucho la barrera del idioma, y lo veo conforme tratan a mi mamá, o como la ve la gente, o muchas veces porque es morena, o porque se ve diferente a mí, o porque no sabe inglés, la tratan menos. Mucha gente a veces no aprende el inglés, pero no es porque no quiera, sino que porque a lo mejor esa mujer o ese hombre es una persona que está manteniendo un hogar, que tiene hasta 2 trabajos o hasta 3, que es papá o mamá a la vez, y aparte tiene responsabilidades en casa. Cuando apliqué para ir a colegio, porque yo dije, yo quiero aplicar, y a mí me decían en la escuela, o cuando iba a la consejera, dijo, no, es que tu idioma no es tan técnico, ocupas un inglés técnico para leer, para expresarte, no creo. Entonces dije, no, yo al menos quiero intentarlo. Yo quería intentarlo y no. En una cadena de pizzería, cuando fui a pedir trabajo, de hecho, antesito de la pandemia, yo quería, era como que, yo quiero ser pues, driver, ¿no? Y iba muy bien la entrevista, y hasta cuando, ¿are you American? No, I'm resident. Oh, ok. Yo sentí que por eso, o por mi acento, o pensaron que por ser de otro país, no lo iba a lograr. Estar trabajando aquí en los Estados Unidos, más de 3 trabajos, y aún así no alcanzas, es de que wow. Y pues todos somos iguales, todos somos seres humanos, no importa el color, la raza, no importa si eres morenito, si te falta un pie o o si eres calvo, todos somos iguales. Yo me haría completamente feliz pues tener un trabajo estable. Y yo siento que con el tiempo y poco a poco, pues lo voy a lograr.
We're going to go ahead and transition into our next feature film.
Living in America as a Black man has never been easy. And I think it's important, considering the times that we're living in now, to be intentional with raising the conversation around the Black experiences, specifically for a male. And that is why I thought it was important for us in San Antonio to identify men from varied backgrounds to share their story.
If it reaches one person, if it reaches one heart, it changes one mind or makes one person empathetic, the goal of this project, in my opinion, is reached, because that's what we want to do, one person at a time.
Please, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. Please, man.
Let's get up and get in the car.
Mama.
Get up and get in the car right.
I can't. Let me cruise.
When I saw Mr. Floyd's video, it just brought out a feeling of just an enraged feeling, because it's right there on camera. You have a man that is roughly around my age, my size, my build, on the floor face down with the officer's knee lodged on his neck, and he's screaming and crying out the same things that I would scream and cry out if I was in his position. I could hear my voice, you know, in the video. It was that close.
I just think about how crazy it is. Like George Floyd kept screaming that he couldn't breathe. And I'm like, if he says he can't breathe, do something else to detain him instead of just putting your knee on his, holding him down the way the cop was.
It's not happening more, it's just being filmed.
You know, I think my mom at a very early age instilled in me, you know, she would lecture on and on and on out. She's probably told me millions of times, you know, how to treat cops, how to react when so-and-so happens. So you can only prepare so much. And sometimes even with all the preparation, it doesn't help.
Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Bah. Paul Laurence Dunbar, 1900.
My dad, he was pulled over just like a week ago. I felt that it was weird because I'm usually not present if someone pulls him over, but he taught me to always have your license registration, your license, your ID, everything right here. Like, make sure that you're recording and have your other hand on the steering wheel where they can see them. So for that, he didn't even tell me, but I started to record on my iPad while he was talking to the police. A white person wouldn't have to even apologize or tell the person that they're not pulling a gun.
The most egregious stop I ever had was my wife and I were stopped at a stop sign going to Austin, and the policeman said, "You were going 70 miles an hour." Wait a minute. I mean, for me to go 70 miles an hour and for you to catch me at the stop sign, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I looked at the policeman after he handed me the ticket. I said, sir, you won't find a more respectful person than me. I said, but you know, and I know that I wasn't going 70 miles an hour. And he never said a word, just handed me the ticket, of course, and he walked out.
I had my everything on, my ribbons, my tie, my accoutrements. I'm coming out of Texas A&M University. He pulls me over, doesn't tell me why he pulled me over, asked me if I was in the military, and then he let me go. And then I'm coming from church with my family. State trooper pulls me over, asked him why he was pulling me over. He said, well, you were weaving. And I don't drink, I don't smoke, I never have. I'm more into health and fitness. It's coming from church. And it was strange because every time I got stopped by the police, I'm being totally honest with you, I had to show my military ID first.
The prejudice against the Negro reverses the precedents of law, and everyone accused is looked on as guilty until he is proven innocent. Paul Lawrence Dunbar, 1900.
You don't have to be told that somebody don't like you or somebody will treat you different. You know, you just got to, you just know.
My dad is 43 years old, so he's pretty old. He teaches me that not everyone is the same, but that's okay. That me and my sister are different from a lot of people, but that shouldn't really affect us. It could affect them, but that's not our problem. What they think about us, because we shouldn't care. We should do our own thing and not be scared of what they might say, what they might do, because you're not living a good life if what other people say affects how you act and how you feel.
First and foremost is respect. We give it and we demand it. I tell my son to treat everybody with respect. Worst thing I've ever heard was that you're shit-skinned. Because you have shit skin, you know what, there's nothing else to say. Like, my argument is you have shit skin. Having to articulate and not want to fight or be upset or be mad, but have to go home and tell your kids. But still, pay the mortgage, pay the bills, be the man that you need to be.
I am the mother of sorrows. I am the ender of grief. Paul Lawrence Dunbar, 1896.
My earliest, I guess, moment that it was really thrown in my face that I was different was being in kindergarten. I was sitting down, and as a child, I used to always love watching my mom put on her makeup. That was one of the things I loved to do in the morning. And so we were sitting in class, and I decided I'm gonna put red markers on my lips because the person who means the most to me in my life, which is my mom, she does that every morning, right? Of course it was lipstick, but you know, the mind of a child. So as I'm putting the red lipstick on, I can remember my teacher taking and snatching the marker out of my hand and quickly saying, you know, boys do not wear color on their faces. And the whole class laughing at me. I didn't know it was wrong because at home, I was allowed to do that.
She gave me a rose, and I kissed it and pressed it. Ah, how my heart glows. Could I ever have guessed it? Paul Lawrence Dunbar, 1899.
Even though as a gay person, I'm supposed to be a part of this large family of LGBTQ persons, I'm still Black. I still have to go into that knowing that as gay as we all are, that they still have those preconceived notions of Black people, whether they're gay or straight. They have those prejudices about or against us. So dealing with that, you know, is difficult. I often find in arguments, I tell people I'm Black first and then I'm gay, if that makes sense.
I went to TMI here in San Antonio, and definitely my family couldn't afford it. I got a grant there, and that was really like, you know, a socioeconomic shock. Just tax bracket that I can identify with. I did learn a lot about the nicer things in life. And so, and just being a natural 14-year-old at the time, 15-year-old, and my peers had nicer homes and lake houses, and, you know, and I was a friendly kid. So yeah, I was often invited on lots of stuff. Yeah, absolutely.
I played a string instrument, and I was also an athlete in high school, in grade school. And so I feel like I was always in this mix of trying to push back against the stereotype that I feel like Black men specifically were always boxed in, of like, okay, they're either just an athlete and they're a really good athlete and they're not good at school, or they just stick to their own friend groups and they only listen to hip hop music, or there's these stereotypes that I feel like are only tied to Black people, Black men in particular. And in my mind, I was like, well, I like those things, but I don't have to be defined by what other people think of me.
Person coming in not knowing that I was Black, my receptionist was white. We had been together at Fort Hood, and she was a registered nurse, and was from San Antonio. We both were getting out of the Army at the same time. So she came up to me one day and said, Harmon, I'd like to work for you. I said, well, I'm just going in practice. I can't afford to pay an RN. She said, just pay me what you can. So I was probably one of the few doctors in San Antonio with an registered nurse as my nurse. But that's how that transpired. So they would come in and they would see Evelyn, who was white. And so she proceeded to bring them back to the back, and all of a sudden the person would see me. And oftentimes they would say they had forgotten their purse. They needed to go back to the car to get it, you'd never see them again. You know, I had this one instance of one of the local physicians, one of the family doctors, asked me to see one of his patients in an emergency room. It was an older lady, she was probably in the 90s. So I go in and see her, and then she's partially demented, but not demented so much that she still wasn't a racist. And she looks at me and starts screaming that the nigger stole her banana. So, you know, you just gotta start laughing.
So old Judy's sitting in a recliner, so we walk in, and probably 10th house we'd been in that day. It was after dinner, and he looked at me, and this dude's he's in distress, and he said, "Son," he said, "I'm a Georgia peach." I had no idea what a Georgia peach meant. I didn't know what he was talking about. He said, "Son, I'm a Georgia peach." He said, "Where I come from, Blacks don't do medicine." And I'm thinking, this dude's had a freaking heart attack, and he doesn't want me to treat him because I'm Black. And so my officer, his name is Pete Lynch, and he's deceased now, and best captain I ever worked for. And he said, well, if he's not good enough to take care of you, then neither are we. And he said, if you want me to call another unit to come take care of you, that's what I'll do. And so the guy backed off of it, and I ended up taking care of him, but I thought the audacity that you could potentially be on your deathbed and the Black face that walks in here to try to save you, you don't want that help.
There has not been, in the history of this country, risen a single Black man whose pretensions have not been sneered at, laughed at, and then lamely wondered at. Paul Laurence Dunbar, 1898.
I felt definitely a lot more awkward and out of place at Alamo Heights because I was one of the few African Americans there.
one of the, literally, my brother and I walked to school. We lived right off of Broadway. And so I was walking, I dropped him off at the elementary school and I went to the middle school. So it wasn't that far of a walk. And literally the first week we were there, my brother and I were walking. Again, my brother's in kindergarten, I'm in 7th grade, and a pickup truck is speeding by up Broadway. And next thing you know, we heard the truck screech, come to a screeching stop. 2 high school kids jump out of the car and basically said, "Niggers go home." And that's the first, kind of week there. And my brother and I remember we kind of looked at each other and we started laughing.
On the field, we were, teammates. We respected one another. We would talk to one another. But then once we got off the field, it was a whole different ball game in terms of our relationships, expectations of one another, the way we even spoke to one another, and words we used to one another. It was completely different. One thing that stands out to me is we're leaving a game when I was in high school, and it was one of the pitcher was driving, and I was in the back seat, and then they were just throwing around the word nigger like it was nothing. And I never really heard the word. I heard it, but I never really understood it, comprehended it. But I was a child. I heard it in songs, but I just thought it was just a rap lyric. But then when I'm hearing my teammates refer to blacks as niggers, it kind of opened up my eyes. And I couldn't just get out the car and walk away. I couldn't just turn off my ability to hear.
The word nigger to me, like I said, by definition, it means an ignorant person. I don't take it as being a black person, but it also goes with how you say it. So if another race called me a nigger, I take it personal if they say it with that emotion, that, I guess, hate.
People today still judge people by their color.
I remember this like it was yesterday. Me and my friend had been dropped off to enjoy a middle school track meet at Blossom Athletic Center. As the meet came to a conclusion, my friend got a call from his mother and stated that she was running a bit late. So we were probably 30 to 45 minutes after everyone had left. And it was me, my friend, and a police officer. We were sitting on the curb waiting to get picked up. So as we're sitting there, the sun begins to set and the officer comes up to us and asks us what we're doing. And I articulated that we were waiting on my friend's mother to pick us up, and she was just a few minutes away. And life really changed in that moment. I didn't expect this response, but he said, "You niggers need to go home." And that was a moment that I realized there was much more to my story that I didn't know about.
Right now, in work and a lot of society right now is going through all these discussions around Black Lives Matter, for example, and the struggle that many white people have about understanding Black Lives Matter and feeling like they can't support that because if they do, then they automatically think that you don't support the police. It's not an either or kind of thing. I absolutely support the police. I absolutely support the need for security and safety. And I don't view Black Lives Matter as this militant organization. I view it more from the eyes of the parents, the moms and the husbands worrying about their kids being killed.
I was pretty certain that other mothers didn't have to repeat to their sons, hey, make sure you have a receipt. Every time you go into the convenience store, if I send you in for an errand, whatever it may be, as much as you think you're prepared, it's more intense than what you're prepared for. And I think every Black man can say that. They'll have good guidance between mothers, fathers, uncles, older siblings, and they try to give you certain warnings and certain, you don't, you don't have to make a mistake to learn from it. Learn from my mistakes.
I can't trust white people. I can trust every race in the world. I can trust them, but there's some people in every race that you just can't, that you have to be cautious.
I was 11 years old and I made the all-star team. And typically 11-year-olds don't make an all-star team. And so I made the all-star team, we were celebrating, and then we got a phone call at home where my mom got off the phone and then she came into my room crying, saying that I just got cut from the all-star team, that they put somebody else on there. And so that was our first conversation I was the only Black kid there. And so that was our first conversation about race. I never knew I was mixed. I never really thought about it. I just kind of hung out with people that I thought that were cool. But that was the first time my mother broke down and said, "You're Black. And so you being Black, you're gonna have to deal with certain issues. And this is your first issue, is how to overcome this."
If somebody has a problem with my skin, it's their problem. It's not mine.
Because I grew up in Catholic school, because I had been at Brockport, I never had a sense of being inferior. I never had a sense that that there was anything that would be denied me because of my color, because of my race. I just grew up believing if you work in the spirit of excellence, if you honored the Lord in your upbringing, that whatever God had for you, you could have.
I guess around 6, my best friend was white, so race was never a problem for me.
I love who I am. There's no denying that whatsoever. But I think 3 or 4, maybe even 5 steps ahead before everything I do. From the way that I dress, from the car I drive, where I drive, how I interact with people. And I've had the ability I can change my dialect depending on where I am. If I'm on a certain part of town and I'm hanging out with certain types of people, I can talk a certain way. I can go to a boardroom and I can flip the switch and I can enunciate and articulate ideas and overanalyze certain subject matters that I wouldn't do in another crowd.
I think America today is better in 2020 than it was in the 60s. And here's why. You look at the advancements of Black people or non-white people in all industries. There is significant progress that's being made. Am I suggesting that we have arrived? Absolutely not. We still have many miles to go. But I will tell you, in this moment in time that we're in, there is still a faction of extremism that exists in America. And I believe that we are in a period of time that this is proverbially the last gasp for the racists. And the ugliest underbelly of America is rearing itself. And I think that there is a real fight for the soul of this country.
It needs to be said that for me to continue to hold these things in without being able to express them is not good. And I wonder how many Black men in America feel like I feel and can't even say anything about it. Like, don't say anything about it. I'm sure a lot of things happen mentally to them that they can't even explain because they're not able to express themselves in any way, shape, or form.
I think that we have to have a cultural transformation in order to do that. It has to be heartfelt, a heartfelt cultural transformation. There's got to be, because there's a feeling of systemic racism within the country. And so in order to fix that, you have to have a cultural transformation, in my view.
as a result of the internet and social media, that allows for things to be more visible. And then I think people are more adamant and more intentional about addressing these kind of distinctions and people being treated for reasons that are really are nonsensical. You know, and so I don't think things are digressing. I think things are being more honest. And when things are being, and when people, the problem with honesty is that it calls people out. And when people feel called out, they feel threatened.
There's something going on in that process of why there are not more people in leadership positions. And you can't, and unless you're telling me that just white males are so much stronger and better and smarter than everyone else, then that's a different conversation. But no one's been able to convince me of that. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and we have to work together. White, Hispanic, Asian, Black, we need to come together and just say, this is the right thing to do.
That's probably the biggest thing that I can think of that one person can do for another is to believe in you. Sometimes when you don't necessarily believe in yourself, that is the most fueling, elevating experience to have, because it helps you to grow and expand opportunities. So plenty of people have done that for me from the time I was, my son's age to today, and I'm really grateful to everybody who's giving me the scores of opportunities to do cool things and be around cool people and be a part of cool projects.
Wow. Wow. Hello, everybody. My name is Christian, and I'm supposed to be speaking, right? I'm supposed to be speaking. Nod. Thank you.
Let me just do a quick introduction to you, Christian. Thank you all. Thank you, everyone who came out today. This is YWCA's DreamWeek event. The future is now changing the narrative about race and economic mobility in our community. Out of an abundance of caution, we had to pivot at the last minute to this virtual event. So thank you for your patience. I am honored to have this amazing panel with us today. And so I'm turning it over to Christian Reed Agba, the CEO of EHCU PR company, and she will be the moderator for today's event. Thank you.
Get myself off mute. There I am. Hello. All right. And all of our panelists, I am so excited for this conversation. I'm going to catch my breath for a little while. I'm going to ask you all, if you haven't already, introduced yourselves, because I can't do you really much justice. And this is a conversation around storytelling. So what's better than telling our stories, sharing our stories, than telling them ourselves? So Lionel, I know we just saw your name at the end of that video. So go ahead and give us a brief introduction of yourself, if you don't mind. Come off mute.
Well, my name is Lionel Sosa, and I am a lifelong resident of San Antonio. And I've been in the advertising and communications business all my life, but right after the George Floyd incident, I met Brandon Logan and Seymour Battle. We were doing a real estate transaction. And this must have been maybe a week after George Floyd. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm just giving you a little bit of my background, and we'll wait for the story later. But I thought that it would be a good idea to take some of the experience that I've had in communication, in producing TV commercials, in producing documents, to make a documentary of the folks that we talked to and that made up the documentary you just saw.
Thank you for that work. Hello, Coda. It's so good to see you again. I'm going to call on you to go ahead and tell our viewers about yourself a bit.
Hi, everyone. Buenas tardes. My name is Coda Rayo Garza. I work at YWCA as Director of Racial Justice and Gender Equity. Alongside Tere and Francesca, led the narrative change work around Why Can't They Just, which you saw earlier. Originally from Laredo, but I'm happy and proud to be doing this work here in San Antonio, Texas.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Coda. Mr. Williams, I'm switching things up only because Teresa has such a good story as well. So Mr. Williams, I'm gonna call on you next to go ahead and share a little bit about yourself.
Thank you. Sure. I'm Reggie Williams, and I'm from Ohio, originally, a little town where it's only about 2% Black in the town. Went to a college that we had 9 African-American males on the campus when I was a freshman, and all athletes of some sort. Graduated from college as a biology major, went into the United States Air Force, retired from the Air Force, and had the opportunity to come to San Antonio. Been in San Antonio 30 years, worked for USAA, worked at the San Antonio Area Foundation, and my last job was at Hallmark University.
Awesome. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. And hello, Teresa. It's so good to see you. Please tell us about yourself.
Yes, thank you. I'm original from Monterrey, Mexico. I have my degree in communication science, and basically my background is on television. I used to work as a news anchor, reporter, and then I have to do my transition to the digital area. But I love films, and I have, my passion is films and also empowering women. So I found this connection between the YWCA and my passion, and I'm really happy to be part of this project. And I'm the marketing manager at the YWCA.
That's awesome. It's so good to be joined by you all. My name is Christian. I'm a publicist, originally from Detroit, but I've been calling San Antonio home for almost 11 years now. So I'm so grateful to be here and grateful for YWCA for hosting this conversation and for creating so many great opportunities for I'm sorry, I tweeted. So you guys, Twitter is going off right now because I told folks about this conversation. My bad. So this conversation that you all were able to really curate some great stories, and I was blown away at how they connected and they ran alongside each other because we're all in this space together, and then how they help with the narrative change, the change of the narrative. So why don't we ask everyone again, and we're going to go right backwards. So Teresa, you'll be first to answer this question of what is narrative change and why is it significant now more than ever when it comes to discussing how to react to marginalization?
I think it's to tell the story from another perspective, more personal. I believe I'm a strong believer of story, the power of storytelling in, how can we promote social changes if we don't listen to other people's stories? So that's what we're trying to do. It's like a awareness, and but basically that's what I think.
Okay. Mr. Williams, how do you see narrative change as a way to affect change for marginalized people?
Well, I've been giving it a lot of thought about narrative change, and I think that telling the story is important, but having the courage to stand up for right in telling the story is even more important, because I believe that without courage, you cannot stand up against wrong. And I think that's demonstrated every day, demonstrated in George Floyd, demonstrated in the activities of Black Lives Matter. Without courage, none of this would happen. The Civil Rights Act would have never been passed without young people sitting on stools and getting cigarette butts put out on them. It takes courage. And then the narrative.
Okay, I love that.
Then the narrative. And then the action that makes the change.
Love that. Lionel, you humbly introduced yourself, but your Wikipedia will tell us way more than what you led us to understand. You're a trailblazer in advertising and marketing across the country. And you actually were very courageous when you launched an advertising business that focused on bringing companies to realize the importance of the Hispanic market and the Latino market. How important was narrative change when you were making your pitches? And then how important is it now? Can't hear you.
At the time that I got into Hispanic advertising, I would see ads that depicted when they showed a Hispanic couple or a Hispanic family, there is this one ad that I kept for years and years and years, and I lost it in one of the moves or something, but it was the perfect example of the Latino stereotype. There was this, and it was in the early days of advertising for Budweiser beer, and they've grown much better about doing the right thing now. But it had a beautiful couple, a male and a female. He was wearing a sarape. He had a big sombrero and he had a big mustache, and he was smiling with his Budweiser beer like this. And his girlfriend or wife was wearing a Mexican blouse, and she was reaching over trying to take the beer away from him. And she, of course, was a senorita type with long black hair. And they were in an adobe house, and there were cactuses on the wall as decorations. And every stereotype, from the sarape to the sombrero to the mustache to the adobe house to the cactus, reeked of stereotype, saying they were trying to communicate this ad is for you, but what they were really saying was you belong in some other bubble that is not consistent with this country or the way that the rest of us live. So I made it my goal every time that we created any advertising, all of the creative people that worked for me, that wrote the ads, that produced the ads, that the Latino would always be depicted as an equal American citizen. And that the home would be just like any other home. The dress would be just like any other dress. And that it would be an American type of situation that the people just happen to be Latino. But nothing other than, hey, here we are eating jalapeno peppers or eating, I forgot one thing, that man also had a taco in his hand, by the way. He had the beer in one hand and the taco in another hand. So every ad that we made was like that, as an American. The Latino is an American with the same dreams, with the same values, with the same contributions as any other American. So we were able to attract clients like Coca-Cola and Burger King and Procter & Gamble and American Airlines, Sprint, on and on and on, because they liked the way that we were able to connect with a Latino mind and soul. And it also allowed us to work on 8 presidential campaigns where you learn a lot about leadership and the way candidates view the Latino population, which is a big voter bloc.
Well, and I really appreciate that answer because you had to really spotlight how to read not only between the lines in terms of the goal, which was getting the point across that this brand is something that people should buy, but also sharing that the brand was also sending messages back. And in sending messages back, let me send one forward and apologize to Angela Driver. Listen, I didn't read between the lines. You're on the second sheet of the people that I can see on this screen here. So I apologize, Angela, for not opening up the conversation and welcoming you on board. Give us a second and then we'll switch back around to the conversation because Lionel gave us a really good answer. But Angela, please, can you introduce yourself for us and forgive me for my flub.
Okay, thank you. My name is Angela Driver. I'm from San Antonio.
Nice to have you. Thank you. Angela, and you're joining us from the YWCA office, or are you joining us from home today?
From the YWCA.
Awesome. Thank you. Welcome. Okay, we're going to get back over to Lionel. Lionel, you gave us a really solid answer surrounding, the messages that we're receiving back and then what they mean to the viewers and to the receivers. So I'm going to hopefully ask Coda a question surrounding, these stories, and as we place them in our prairie view, given what Lionel said, he received a message, and as he understood a message was being given, how should people that don't see themselves in these messages receive them? In terms of the stories that we watched today, we saw a lot of different narratives be well defined from the point of view of the people that are marginalized. How should people that don't see themselves in those women's videos or in the In My Skin videos, how should they receive them, in your opinion?
Yeah, well, fundamentally, narrative change is about shifting perceptions and often deeply rooted, and internalized toxic narratives and beliefs about certain groups or people. So, ultimately changing the narrative is about changing power and people's focus away from those deeply rooted beliefs about people to then bring out what the systemic fracture is. So if people are not finding themselves in these stories, it's because number one, they may have never been in a vulnerable position to have experienced racism, sexism, discrimination. And so the whole idea here with narrative change and using stories to shift those perceptions is to introduce people who may have never found themselves in those positions to put them in their shoes, to have them, forgive the pun, right? To live in the skin of the other, whose experiences are fundamentally shaped by, the legacies of discrimination and racism, in the case of Living in My Skin, but also in the case of Why Can't They Just? So it does require, a bit of a willingness to accept the message. But we also do the work of putting those stories in front of people. And for Why Can't They Just, we did that by strategically placing these stories in ads on TV aimed at particular groups of folks. So I hope that kind of answers the question.
Yes, thank you so much. It's very important that we recognize how the stories that we are sharing are being shared as well as being received, so that we can have that proper follow-up and that proper ability to have the compassion to people that may not understand. And speaking of understanding, as marginalized people, we share stories amongst ourselves. In the In My Skin video, we saw a 10-year-old boy recalling how his father had gotten pulled over. And this question is coming towards you, Reggie. He shared about not only how his father had gotten pulled over, but what his father told him to do. And this is a 10-year-old child. So a father telling a child to have your license and the registration available and ready. He can't even drive, but he was prepped. Right. And so, how do conversations like that when we were sharing stories amongst each other, how does that help, or does it not help to share in narrative change, in your opinion, Reggie?
Yes, I think it does help. And the good news is the young man had a father that cared and had the wisdom to sit and talk with him. My experience was that of Angela. You know, I lived in a single parent home. My mother and father were divorced very early. Never remember living with my father, but my mother. It's hard for a single mom to raise a child, a male child. But she was wise enough to put me in the company of very solid role model Black men, okay, who taught me a lot of things. But the major things I learned were from her. And she told me three things every day, like the father told the son. She said, one, don't steal. To her, that was saying, be honest, because in my day, the first way a Black man went to jail was if he stole something. The second thing was to pay your way through. That was her way of saying, don't expect something for nothing. In other words, everything you get, you need to pay for. And the third thing, of course, was be willing to go the last mile to work to do whatever you want. Now, in a lot of cases, because of my silver hair, you can tell people in my time, everything they did, if it was of note, if it were something that meant something important, you were probably going to be a first. And one of the first things that happened to me in my little hometown was I was the first to swim in this swimming pool. I went to the swimming pool, jumped in, and they've been swimming ever since. Now, back to that courage thing. No, I couldn't swim and dived into the deep part of the pool, and I have no idea how I got out of there today. But my hometown still recognizes that as a major change in what happened in a little town near Cleveland, Warrenville, Ohio. So I think that taking an action, thinking and then telling the story, which is the narrative, and then it helps to make permanent change, like Lionel said.
And it might teach you how to swim. Angela, when's the last time you jumped in the deep end of a pool? Or how are you?
I've been doing it ever since. Ever since. I dive off into things that are people in San Antonio, the San Antonio Area Foundation, I was the CEO. At USAA, I was the senior vice president. At Hallmark, I was a vice president for advancement. And all of that was, hey, I dived into it. I don't think that anybody can do it better, and I won't allow anybody to hold me back. And that's what I try and pass on to young Black men and women. And that's where my passion is.
Thank you so much, Mr. Williams. Magnificent answer and a lot of mentorship. So I hope you all are taking some notes. You got your pen and you got your paper. We know to be courageous and dive right in. I'm going to scoot over to Angela and I'm going to ask her, when's the last time you dived into the deep end? And what part of sharing your story have you seen benefits directly affecting your community when it comes to sharing your story?
The last time was, I guess I dived into this story and it has made some change. You know, I've seen it. I've had people come up to me and speak to me about it. So yes.
That's beautiful. And does it create a lot of conversation within your family and your immediate family members?
Yes, my family, they're very proud. They're very happy. They understood the struggle, that I went through. So just to see me speak about it and talk about it, they were happy for me because I finally shared it. So yes.
Well, we are grateful for you. Thank you so much, Angela.
you.
Okay. Teresa, I'm sorry, Teresa. So how specifically do the videos we show today succeed in changing the narrative? I know we talked about who that you all send them and you get them in front of a very specific audience, but you also have this long-term campaign for Why Can't They Just with the website and things of that sort. So you all have very specific goals for this campaign. Can you tell us a little bit about those goals?
Yes, first of all, I think the first goal is to create awareness. That will be like the first step. How can you promote like social changes if you don't know what's going on? We need to be isolated because of the pandemic, but we can ignore what's going on around in our community. So our first goal is that, and it has to do a lot with the YWCA mission that is empowering women, eliminate racism, justice, dignity, liberty for all. And of course, in our webpage, like Why Can't They Just, we're also inviting people to, if they can host a screening. And we have a lot of plans, but like the first phase of this is to create awareness, because as I told you, how can we don't know? First of all, we need to know what's going on. And it does have a lot of things with what Lionel mentioned about the stereotype, like it's like that we have an idea of the Latinos, like for example, me as an immigrant, or, it's people need to know that we're like, to know that our stories, like people's stories.
Yes, yes. And speaking of, you as being an immigrant, we saw in the Why Can't They Just Learn English video, the young lady had gone on an interview and the interviewer expressed astonishment, at her dialect. And then we saw in the In My Skin videos, Judge Cruz Shaw mentioned that he can change up his dialect and he can, enunciate and according to whomever he's around at the moment. How important is language when it comes to, sharing our stories and having them believed across the realms, across the spaces of audiences? And then we're going to go to Teresa and Coda.
Yeah, definitely. That's why we decide to include 3 stories in Spanish. Actually, like Liliana, one of the stories that we share, she's today here also. And at the beginning, we interview her in English, but we find out that she feels like totally more comfortable to share her story and to be more, more herself, in Spanish. So it is important to know that, yeah, definitely we're here and we have to learn to speak English, but we have to give a room for those who don't feel comfortable. So that's why we decide to include these 3 stories in Spanish. And because, our goal also is like me as an immigrant, I want to see people to see women, no, regardless of the color of our skin or our accent, just the way that women contribute to the community. So it was important for us to include people who speak Spanish, especially here in San Antonio, that a lot of people habla español.
Coda?
Yeah, the only thing I will add to that is that, in attempting to shift the tide, we're doing it one cup at a time, because there's so many different components to this. And on the road to shifting perceptions about women and women of color living in poverty, we also have to acknowledge language supremacy in this country. And so dismantling white supremacy also means dismantling language supremacy, and bringing in that the Spanish language is important. You know, yes, it's definitely important demographically, but it's also important because of the history and the oppression that has come with that language being with the English language being lifted up and all secondary languages being pushed and oppressed down. So that's the only thing I would add.
Thank you so much for saying language supremacy, because that's the thing, you know, we have that space where people don't feel that they have the right to speak up and to be heard because they don't sound like the decision makers or they don't sound like the oppressors. And so we have to go back into a space where we have to figure out what is empowering us to share our stories, which lends me right back around the way to Angela. I'm coming back over there to you. When it talks about empowering, when I'm talking about empowering audiences to share their stories, and you said that your family was proud of you for speaking and sharing now. You know, how important is the portion of getting over that? And if I say it, I don't mean any offense, but fear of sharing, part of changing the narrative that we see. Was there some fear? And then did you have specific steps that you went through to get over that so that you can share with us today?
Yes, I did. It took me a while to, you know, to get over it, to make that decision that I've always wanted to share a story about something that what it might have been what I went through. So I made the decision when they asked me to do this project, to have the courage to share, you know, what I've been through. And it became much easier for me. So yes, I did have the courage to do it. So that's what I did. I really enjoyed just doing it. I relaxed.
And you know what I really appreciated, Angela, between you and I and everyone that was watching, was how personably everyone spoke to the cameras, whichever camera was in front of you. So you know there was teams there that looked like you, that made you feel comfortable on both sides of the cameras. I'm talking about Why Can't They Just and In My Skin. Everyone was open and candid and honest, and I really, really appreciated that the most. And I hope you all really saw those spaces where people can share openly and honestly and kind of think, you know, I want this to be normal. I want this to be something that we can do across the board, right? I see Liliana turned on her camera. Hello, Liliana. It's so good to see you. So grateful to have you. And so I don't think I'm gonna guide any questions, but you all, let's get ready to start asking some questions. So if you have any questions, drop them in the Q&A and we'll get right to them in momentarily. I am going to ask a question to the entire panel right now. It's about this year's Dream Week. And this year's theme for Dream Week is the future. Dream Week is celebrating 10 years, and they've been really creating and curating some conversations around inclusivity, excuse me, tolerance, and justice. And so, what is the future, you know, and how do we hope to see the work we have to do together to make sure that the narratives we want to see are achieved? I know Mr. Williams, I'm gonna go first to you because you gave us the courage, and that within that portion, I know you're going to talk about speaking up. You had a lot to say about being happy that young folks are speaking up. So please kind of indulge these young ears and mentor us a little bit more about how to keep on the path of sharing.
I think we should all go back and read the I Have a Dream speech of Dr. Martin Luther King. Read it carefully. That was 1963. And something sticks out in that speech to me, some words. The fierce urgency of now. That sticks out. And the other thing for the future is I look forward to the day when my kids will be judged on their character rather than the color of their skin. And those two things, and I did not an exact quote, but those two things hold my attention because I look to the future I've got 2 grandchildren. I had hoped that they never would have to fight the same battles that I fought. But it looks like they might. And so there is a fierce urgency of now. And there is this desire for most of people of color that, hey, we not be judged on the color of our skin, but be judged on the content of our character, those things that we can do.
Let's do them. Yes. Yes. Thank you. Thank you for that. Reading MLK's, any of his speech is absolutely, it's great Sunday work. It's great work that we all have to do to really read them and understand what the mission was and why we still celebrate the way we celebrate. And so thank you for that answer. Lionel, you've participated in a number of city events and things, and this might be one of the most memorable Dream Weeks because we have to do things like this and go virtual and host events outside of event venues. How do you see the future in changing the narrative with the advent of technologies and social media? And now also, let's consider it, brands and companies waking up and joining the movement. How do you see the change? How do you see the narrative being changed?
You know, Christian, I know that I'm getting so much out of this with everybody's conversation and with Reggie's conversation and so forth, that I put in the chat now my definition of narrative change. In my view, narrative change is telling a story in such a powerful and courageous way, and I missed the word "way" there in the that it creates action, changes culture, and reshapes policy. So if it can do those things, and that we can say, okay, I'm going to do something in such a powerful and courageous way. And I believe that what you are doing right now, all of you at the YWCA, is certainly powerful and courageous. The other things there are tougher, that it creates action, changes culture, and reshapes policy. That is the tough part. Now, the toughest part about that it has to be so omnipresent. I think George Floyd has done more to change all of what we're talking about than any other single man has ever done, and it cost him his life. But when we are seeing a cultural change and policy change, because the police officer was found guilty, and the 3 men that ran after that guy that man in their pickup were guilty. And even the white lady that was remorseful for shooting the black man that was running away, she's found guilty. That is huge because that never happened before. And it took the death of a man, it took the courageous young woman filming the whole thing. If it hadn't been for her filming it, none of this would be happening. It would still be being swept under the rug. And when we see a 10-year-old young man being so articulate in defining what he has to do and what his father has told him, because even as a Latino, who we do have some levels of discrimination, not nearly what Black men and women go through. But when you have to rehearse what you're going to do when you're going to be stopped because you're a Black person, I never had to do that to my boys. I never had to have that speech. I never had to tell my boys, be sure to have a receipt every time you go to a store. Be sure that you walk in the store with your hands either in your pockets or your hands out so everybody can see that you're not taking anything. And and then being, you know, I've been called a speck and everything else like that, but the darker a person's skin is, the more discrimination you get. So because I am not dark skinned, I've been discriminated against, but not in the same way that some of my very, very dark skinned brethren have. And I have learned so much through these conversations that I'm a new person. I'm a new person. I still have a lot to learn, even with all of this experience and my age. But I have noticed so many things that most Black men, especially if they are big and muscular, go out of their way to telegraph to you, I'm not going to hurt you. Because when people are, when a big Black muscular man is walking towards you on the side, walking to a white person on the sidewalk, particularly if she's a woman, she gets very intimidated, grabs her purse, and does these gestures or walks to the other side of the street. And Black men experience this every day. They see that clutching of the purse, they see them walking across the street, and but even though they telegraph, I'm not going to hurt you, by not even looking at you. Eye contact between white people and Black people is more rare than it is between white people and white people, or Black people and Black people. I've learned all of these little things that are teaching me how to be a better person. And it's only through these panels like this and storytelling like this and sharing experiences that we've been able to do it. But, you know, Black people is, you know, ever since I'm Black and I'm proud, Black is beautiful, Black Lives Matter, Rainbow Coalition, all of these movements, all of these narratives that took hold nationally did so because there were bold people speaking on their behalf and getting the word out. There has to be big leadership, and whether it's Reggie Jackson or the folks that are out there today, the new people that are out there today telling these stories and telling them again and again and again. What you're asking is the difficult part. And of course, with social media, you can get a lot of free likes and so forth if you have a powerful, courageous, and short story to share again and again, that people take it and say, wow, I've got to share this. Wow, I've got to share this. If it's courageous enough, it's powerful enough, short enough, people will share it.
And I like that you say short, mainly because I learned the long game of narrative change, actually sitting right across from Coda and Teresa and Francesca a couple of months ago at a Black Enterprise. And this is actually the day I met you, Lionel, as well, at the Black Enterprise Diversity and Inclusion Awards, where I paid very, very close attention to the many types of people that have been marginalized and how they, as people were getting awards, and these are people, there were representatives and allies and staff and executive that have devoted their time and devoted their futures to fighting for the equal treatment of our less than capable, of our impoverished, of our migrants and immigrants, of course, of our blind, and of people that have not necessarily had access to storytelling. And so Teresa and Coda, I'm just going to switch up the conversation for a little while, for just a little bit, and bring in a little bit more of what Lionel said about paying attention to the short stories, because we hadn't seen a lot of history in the marginalization of these groups of blind people, of handicapped people, of migrants and immigrants. Well, yes, migrants and immigrants we've seen, but we hadn't seen a lot of very in-depth stories surrounding these people. Their stories are roughly short compared to the civil rights movement and the Si Se Puede movement and all of the other Black Lives Matter movements, and of course, of our LGBT brothers and sisters as well. How do you see those smaller stories or shorter stories that are just getting that encouragement to speak up, and they just have those allies within this generation? How do you see those stories growing? Coda, you want to go first, and then Teresa, I'll come to you.
Sure. Yeah, I think, it is a ripple effect, and it definitely is a buildup. Narrative change happens because of those individual stories that eventually add up to shift the tide, to reuse the phrase I used earlier. And there's just so much work to do in shifting narratives. I mean, even just, if you think of, anti-Black attitudes in the Latino and beliefs in the Latino community, and then connecting that back to the history, right? And, the codified and the legal ways through which anti-Blackness was encouraged in Latin America. So in a lot of these countries, the Dominican Republic, are only just in the last century really acknowledging the Afro roots of the people in that country. And all of that happens, again, with the individual stories, about and shifting perceptions at the individual level. And so I think, it's definitely important, and it's needed, and it does take courage, as Mr. Williams said early on, to share that story. And then for us, as the sort of mediums or the mechanism by which we help amplify their story on our behalf, it requires humility and authenticity to treat the stories with the respect that it's not utilitarian, that it is, that we're sort of aligned and cosmically connected, so that it doesn't become a replica of that utilitarian and oppressive relationship that folks have held with others.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Teresa, I'm gonna come to you with the same question. How do you see the stories of more recent stories of those marginalized people but building into the long game of the more prevalent stories of marginalized people?
It is important, and we're glad that as part of this project, we have like 8 different stories, in which one of them, people talk about like health, somebody about housing, the other one about immigration. So to be honest, like during this journey, and sometimes I feel a little bit like, like I can relate with some of the stories, because like one of the things about like the DreamWeek is that we're talking about the future, like the future is now. And I was thinking that like when I moved here, when to the United States, the main reason was because I want my children to have a better future. So the future is now. And now that I'm working on this, I'm thinking, I don't want a better future. I want a better today. And this is the way that we can do it, like, and change, beginning with our narrative. Like on my case, is like, sometimes it's like, okay, I do have an accent, instead of thinking that is like, oh, I speak 2 languages. So it starts with, like sharing our stories. And, but yeah, I'm like really glad that Angela, Liliana, all these ladies were like, brave enough to share their stories and let us know that because those cases are not isolated.
So true. Liliana gave us a really great comment. Thank you so much, Liliana. She said, thank you first for the opportunity. It's an honor, and to be a part of this amazing project. The project, Liliana, if you don't mind me just tapping you in, tell us, how do you feel after you've participated in the project? You know, how do you feel, and how have you encouraged other women to speak up as well?
Oh yeah, thank you for the opportunity. Yeah, I just wanted to write something also in the chat. You know, I wanted to share it with you, my feelings. Yeah, it is really an honor for me to be part of this amazing project. I think it really meant a lot to me having the opportunity to share part of my story life. Yeah, you know, it takes a lot. like there was you were saying earlier something about having courage, right? It really takes a lot of a person to stand up and tell your story, right? And I was actually, you know, afraid of, nervous and anxious to do that, but and then I just, you know, listened to my heart, and I just felt like I had to say something, and I had to tell my story. And the reason was because, you know, I just wanted to tell women out there that it's always, you know, if you have hope and faith, you're always going to find, you know, a beautiful light at the end of your journey, right? We all struggle and have very hard moments and situations in life, but it's always, you know, something very nice at the end of the road, and there is always a learning lesson, and we have to embrace that, because that makes us be better persons and stronger women, and that means a lot. So I really, you know, I want to appreciate and I mean, say thank you to you for this, because it is a very nice. This project have a purpose, and I think that's you know, the purpose is empower women, and that means a lot to our Hispanic community here in San Antonio.
Absolutely right. Couldn't say it better myself. These projects are very, very purposeful. They're purposeful in terms of getting people to share, like you, Liliana, and then of course your stories are going to inspire others, and then it's going to give people opportunity to open up to mentorship and ask the questions that they need answers to make sure that they're getting the proper, they're handling their story and their narrative in a way that is effective and efficient for them. Speaking of speaking up and seeking some mentorship, a friend of the community, Selena Montoya, is in our comments right now, and she says, "Thank you for sharing this today. I hope this isn't too technical, but I'm raising ethnically mixed children who attend public school in Texas. How do you see the messaging targeting at kids changing, especially with the effects of legislation like SB 3? Which dramatically alters the way teachers are allowed to engage students in civics and history and narratives." So I'm guessing you're talking about a little theory. So I'm gonna throw this to Coda, because I'm pretty sure she can talk a little bit about education, and I'm gonna reach over to Lionel because he can talk about messaging the kids in terms of advertising. So Coda, you go first, and then Lionel, and we're gonna go real quick, you guys, because we're moving up into 3 o'clock real fast.
Yeah, so briefly, I totally understand where you're coming from, Selena, because I, you know, have children attending public school as well. But it because of the intensity of, you know, this sort of environment where we are, we've pitted parents against the education system. That's happened before, and it's happening again, and here in Texas specifically, where we're prohibiting teachers from telling the true story of how this country came to be. So then it's incumbent upon us, on the parents, to ensure that our kids are learning the real history of this country and its past. That is not good. That is not all, you know, savior running away from oppression. Instead, it was, you know, the story of taking of land, of taking of people. And so I'll stop there because I know we're short on time, and hand it over to Lionel.
You know, Coda, you're so right that, you know, because of the political atmosphere and the people who are making the laws right now are trying to keep their story alive. You know, the story that's been suppressed for so long they want to continue to suppress it so that it is not told, and only the told, you know, like the Battle of the Alamo and how and all of these stories that need to be told that are not being told. And you're correct. If they cannot be taught in school, it is up to us to teach them at home. And for us to teach them, what are the books that we must read as individuals, that we must read parts of them to our children so that we can teach the right story. And I think we really, you know, one of the books that comes to mind is Forget the Alamo, because it tells another story of the Alamo that is not the story of the heroes from Tennessee that came to San Antonio to Texas to freedom from Mexico and all of that kind of thing. That the Mexicans were not the bad guys and these guys were the good guys and all of that kind of thing. You know, every civilization that's powerful overtakes another civilization, just as the Europeans overtook the indigenous Indian here, just as Spain came in or France came in to take over. And just, you know, then Spain took it over, and then Mexico took it over, and then it became a republic and so forth. So it is who is more powerful at the time, and that makes the history. We cannot let the governor and the lieutenant governor and these people that are fueling this policy to make this policy forever. As political leadership changes, the stories will change. But that means that we must be doing something now. And I love Teresa's thing of a better today. You know, a better future has been said many times. A better today is said very, very few times. And I think that that's what we all need to be working for, making it a better today by taking on our individual responsibilities to tell the stories that need to be told to our children.
Thank you. And I think, you know what, I'm not rushing us through this conversation at all. And I thank you so much for that answer, because you actually just inspired me. I sat up yesterday to get some quotes for today, but then at the same time I watched the In My Skin video again, and you all had those quotes from Paul Laurence Dunbar, and I was really intrigued because I haven't read Paul Laurence Dunbar probably for about 20 years, and so it caught my eye, and I definitely put a list together of new things that I wanted to read. So I would like you all, while we're wrapping up, we have Coda is going ham right now with some suggestions for some books. I have some books around me, so I want you all, if you all have some books, I want to start my first one. I actually asked for this at my housewarming, How to Be Anti-Racist by Ibrahim Kendi, and very, very informational book. So you all get ready. I'm gonna come right to you after I go. I only got like 3. Coda's got like 50, but let's see. We have The New Jim Crow. This is actually sent to me by my good friend Molly Cox. Really outrageously informational. Here's a San Antonio storybook. It's called The Warrior Women Project. I suggest this to you all. It's the stories of immigrant African women here in San Antonio, living here in San Antonio right now. 50 stories, 50 amazing African women. And then, of course, for our kiddos. And y'all don't know this, but I don't got no kids, but I could not have it change things. So you all definitely let's see. Coda has given us first of all, Teresa, of course, yes, ma'am, we do have to go and watch all of the videos on whycan'ttheyjust.org, and not only watch them, but thumbs up them on YouTube and share them on Facebook. That was a directive. I was giving you all a directive. Okay, so we also have, Coda has put up some great things, an Indigenous Peoples History of the United States. Yes, Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz, A People's History of the United States by Howard Zinn, and the 1619 Project. If you have not yet seen any of the million stories around the 1619 Project, look at Mr. Reggie, he has his up. Absolutely phenomenal space to be in when it comes to really sharing about the history of race and the history of how we because we can only learn about what to do next by looking back on our history. So definitely the 1619 Project, and then all of the history and the conversations that it has started since being published. And then Selena has given, one more from Coda. She's currently reading Inventing Latinos, A New Story of American Racism by Laura Gomez. Thank you for that one. Definitely going to grab that one. I'm putting that on my Amazon list. Selena says, thank you. Oh yes, big fan of San Antonio African American Community Archive and Museum. That's SACAM. It's down at La Villita. They have a number of events happening for DreamWeek. So definitely visit. And that is another directive. So we're excited for SACAM and all of the history that they have as well. Why can't they just, former Trinity professor, shout out to Trinity. Shar Miller has a great new book, West Side Rising. Okay, going to get that one right away. And Selena says her kids have Revolutionary Women of Texas and Mexico coloring book. What? Thank you, Vaughn. And Lionel and Kathy, y'all give gifts. Let me just tell you where my address is so I can get mine also. So you all, you all, I am so grateful. Angela, do you have any last words? Can I give it to you to kind of wrap up this conversation and do a little bit of inspiring? Is that all right with you, Angela? If it's not, cut your mic off, cut your camera off, and you cuss me out later.
No. I was just trying to hear everything you said. Yes, I'm gonna continue to write, to just empower other women to just tell their story and not be so afraid that you're alone, because we've all been through something. So let's just, you turned it off.
Thank you, Angela. Continue to inspire. Teresa, you had something for us, no?
No, I was just like, I'm very, proud of Angela and Liliana and all the ladies that were part of the project. That's it.
Proud of those ladies, proud of the gentlemen for the In My Skin campaign. I'm really grateful for the In My Skin campaign. It showed a lot of insight into our very small community, but very large storyline here in San Antonio. So very, very grateful for you all. Super grateful for YWCA for living true and honest to their mission and really gearing up our next generation of women storytellers and shareholders in our community to enrich each other with how we see moving forward. With that being said, I'm going to hand it back over to Michelle or Francesca or Teresa. Take us out.
Thank you, everyone. We are big shout out to Kristen Reed Agba. She is a natural talk show host. Hope to see her replacing Oprah and Ellen soon. Lionel Sosa, longtime fan. I'm so honored that we've had the chance to work with you on this. Reggie Williams, your stories and your inspiration for courage. And of course, Coda and Teresa on the amazing YWCA team and the co-creators of Why Can't They Just. We've been talking that this could be the first in of many conversations about changing the narrative on race, on women of color, and on poverty. And we look forward to seeing how we can do it in the future. Thanks to everyone who spent your windy Saturday with us today. And don't forget to visit whycan'ttheyjust.org and spread the word. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Y'all have a good afternoon.
Thank you. Bye.